Hello there, welcome to Spellbreak TLDR. This is a little video where I'll try to go over all the things Spellbreak in a really quick manner. I'll go over classes and their gauntlets and general tips for them, as well as the runes and gear. And I will finish it off with some general gameplay tips. As a quick disclaimer, all of this is recorded in the closed beta, and most definitely a lot of things have changed on release where you're watching it now. So keep that in mind. A lot of this stuff might not be completely accurate, but it should give you the general knowledge. Invis makes you invisible. There is a slight outline, so you're not completely invisible, but you are pretty invisible. Dash boosts you forward. You can carry momentum a little bit by jumping, and if you go from higher distance, you carry more momentum. Fetterfall launches you in the air, and you start falling down slowly. If you want to fall down faster, you can attack. Springstep. I think this will most likely be changed on release, but right now it makes you go up and down. You can use it, the up momentum, to shoot, to get the insta high ground on your players for easier fireballs, or to get a high ground easier from Stoneshapers. Flight lets you fly after a short cast. What you can do with it is you can cancel it early with spacebar to get a boost, to get a nice airtime versus your opponent. Wolfsblood lets you see enemies through terrain and wall. Its effect is really big, so you kind of want to cast it somewhere where it's not as visible. It is very nice on drop because you can see where everyone is, and it also gives you movement speed. So you can use it to escape or try to catch down enemies. Shadowstep bursts you forward and makes you invisible. As dash, it can be used omnidirectional, so you can use it to bait people. Teleport teleports you a far distance. Some people look at your direction while you're teleporting, so what you can do is you can teleport and swap your direction, and if you're chasing someone, like you're teleporting behind them for example, you can prepare your fireballs by swapping their directions and shooting afterwards like this. Crono Master, you activate it, and after a little bit of time you get put back in the place where you activated it with your health as well. Will often time your chrono, so what you can do is at the last second swap it out to a different rune, so you don't return to your direction. So they're waiting on you there, but you actually are here. This is only possible with the Spellslinger talent. It was the movement, and there's no sprint button. It's on default highest max speed. Gear, boots, make you run faster. Belts, give you armor. Armor is basically as health, but it gets applied corrosion. Corrosion ticks down your armor per second if you get hit by a toxic. Amulet gives you mana, very nice. Remember, levitation doesn't care about your amulet. It drains as much from the first till the last. So you want to be avoiding levitation mid-combat, because here you lose much more mana and you lose much more potential the higher your amulet is. Fire Gauntlet, and its class is Pyromancer. Fire Gauntlet is really good at medium to close range. It shoots a projectile fireball. Sorcery for Fire Gauntlet is Flame Wall. It does a flame wall. This flame wall applies ignite. Toxic Gauntlet. Toxic is a close range gauntlet. It applies an arcing petals. Though Toxic does great damage up close, don't let its up close nature fool you. It is pretty decent at range as well, as you garden hose the whole battlefield. Toxic sorcery is Toxicologyst, an AoE ball that applies corrosion and tick damage while you're in it. Stone Gauntlet. Stone travels in a straight path and it hits only grounded targets. It does have a vertical hitbox, but it's relatively low. But it's big enough that you can't really jump it or levitate it. You have to be mainly in a different terrain. It's quite difficult to levitate it if you haven't started, like if you're trying to react on it. You could probably only react to a max distance slam. Sorcery throws a boulder. This boulder is very useful because it blocks all attacks. If you time it correctly, you can theoretically block all incoming damage. It is super tricky though. Frost Gauntlet. Most efficient long to medium long range. It can be used close range as well, but it's much harder. Shoots an ice projectile that's very fast and does a lot of damage. Your sorcery creates an ice dome that freezes anything inside. Ice dome blocks lightning and fire. Also win. Your opponent can shoot on your ice dome from above though. The Wind Gauntlet is a close range gauntlet that fires fast projectiles. It does more damage the more up close you are. Its sorcery is a tornado. This sorcery can be applied with multiple effects. Tornado curves your projectile. Lightning is a mid to long range gauntlet that zaps people. Your sorcery is an AoE stun with great range. It does 20 damage. Do not use your sorcery in the air because you will be in the air for a very long time and people might hit you. Try to lead your sorcery in the path of your enemy so they can't escape. Your first ability is Combust. A fire explosion radius plus 200. That means if you hit next to them, it still does damage. You don't have to hit direct. But if you do hit direct, that applies an ignite. You can use this to check corners and check confound spaces to see if someone's hiding. Firefly. You're immune to your firewall, and on entrance you have Firefly. Firefly is this. One neat thing about Firefly is once you use all your mana, you can use it to hide your mana recharge animation. Pyromancer's third ability is Pyrolysis. I said it correctly. It applies 2x damage to a firewall. It's the blue thing. Your fourth ability is Conflag. It spawns four smaller fireballs, each dealing about 10 damage. Note about Conflag is it doesn't hit mid-air, it only hits on land. Good offense for fire are Toxic, Lightning, Wind, Stone, and Ice. Basically everything, depending on what you want. Though the most common are Toxic and Lightning. Lightning to finish our targets and Toxic to have greater damage and AoE. Most common talents are Focus Mana, Runic Harmony, Fervor, Thirsty Recovery. Some people might go Recklessness. Tips with Pyro. You want to aim at their feet because that creates a puddle which does very nice stick damage and it does ignite. Or you want to go for directs. If it's hard for you to land shots, look at their arcs. Most people levitate up and fall down. You can hit them when they're on the ground, when they reach their apex, and when they're falling down. It's also easy to hit someone after they use a dash, or their mobility rune. With Pyro you want to be very aggressive, but not so aggressive that you combust yourself, because that sucks. If you're playing versus an ice player, remember to stand behind your fire puddles and shoot behind them, because ice doesn't shoot through fire. They're like flame wall. They interact in the same way as in they apply ignite as well. If you apply toxic to the fire, you bake dragonfire. That does 20 ticks. Very good damage. Your gauntlet doesn't require line of sight. You can come out of cover, flick to the enemy and come back. Don't be trash at aim though. Peek out, in and out from cover. Don't do that. You can distinguish the firewall or the fire puddle with wind. Toxicologyst's first ability is Viscosity. It applies toxic puddles to the ground. These apply a slow and thick damage. There are many interactions with the toxic puddles, most useful of which is Dragonfire. It does 20 tick damage, and you can spread it. Very nice. Toxicologyst's second ability is called Vanishing Mist. It gives you a dash with an Invis on entering your cloud. Vanishing Mist dash is omnidirectional. You can use this to debate your enemy. Outbreak. While invisible, toxic sprays do 75% damage. The number might be tweaked. Anyways, gameplay isn't. You do any Invis and you slap, you do hella damage. Very nice. Works off any form of Invis. Spreading Sickness. 2 extra clouds. Try to spread your clouds in on terrain when you first launch it, so you have a nice rollout. Best offhand with toxic is ice or fire. Tips for Toxicologyst. You want to use your Invis to mass your ice charge up. You want to engage with your Vanishing Mist and get out with your rune. It is really hard to disengage with Vanishing Mist because there's a lot of fire everywhere. And if you Vanishing Mist with fire, you get Dragonfire, and it's very ouch. You can combine your sorcery with fire to create Dragonfire. It does 20 tick. Fireball does 38. If you're running fire offhand, what you want to do is first apply the puddle and then a fireball, because that creates 20 ticks really instantly. For a pool combo, you can try a rune, fire, fireball, attack. That does a lot of damage in a really short time. Very nice. If you throw your Toxic Cloud through Fireball, it will apply an instant DF to a Fireball and on the cloud itself. Talents for Toxicologyst: Runic, Harmony, Fervor, Cav, Fortitude, mostly Fervor though, Thirsty. I would suggest running the Shadowstep with Toxicologyst. Stoneshaper, Stone Skin, Slam Ground, get Armor. Remember, you don't need to hit someone to stand this armor. If you're running roam and you see someone, you can spam the ground and gain your armor this way. Bedrock, on cast, crash to the ground. Whoop. You can cancel Bedrock with your sorcery. You can use this to make your path more unpredictable. You can cancel Bedrock with a spell too. Use Bedrock and your movement rune to make your movement very unpredictable.
Combine dash with Bedrock to carry for the distance.
Creation, boulder size grows while flying. Big boulder. You can apply multiple elemental interactions to your boulder. Avalanche. You get another boulder. With Avalanche, you don't want to throw your boulders the same place, you want to throw them in different directions so they cover more distance, and you might want to lead your boulders into your opponent and cover their escape routes. Most used gauntlets with stone is fire, wind and lightning. You use wind and lightning to finish off your opponents that are in the air and hard for you to hit. Use fire for the same thing and for more sustainable damage. If you slam a fire puddle that creates chariot, this makes your slam be on fire. Also works for the firewall. You can throw your boulder through a firewall to apply fire instantly on it. You can be more aggressive on drop because you have on default 20 plus more armor, but I would really suggest for you to look for an armor and for boots because you have very low mobility. And if you get level 1, Bedrock is not as high of mobility as other classes get. Most common talents are Harmony, Fervor, Recovery, or Thirsty. For Stoneshaper, I would suggest the Dash rune or the Springstep rune. Frostborn's first ability is Frozen Alacrity. It creates ice trails. You move fast on them. Also, it helps you carry momentum from dash. Remember, on your frost trail, it's not only you who moves fast, but also the enemies and your allies. Frost and water, that's what comes after frost, interacts with many elements, especially with toxic, that you can create a lot of toxic puddles and also set them on fire, creating a lot of DF. That's very nice and very much damage. Ow. Icicle. You freeze in air when you aim. You carry momentum in Icicle a little bit. Icicle also highlights all nearby enemies. This is affected by the same hover thing that is affecting your abilities, that you cannot hover in the air forever. Tundra. Immune to damage while casting, gives you iframes, invulnerability frames. On cast you do not take any damage, and also it increases its duration. Once you get Tundra, you can become much more aggressive. After landing a snipe, you can push your enemy and use your Tundra to have iframes and not take damage during your cast. And freeze them. Ice Prism, your last ability. Once you hold for a little bit, it overcharges and you do more damage. You have to hold for 0.5 seconds for 35% increase. The numbers might change. You have an indicator on your crosshair when this effect's happening. This game has no headshot multipliers. Ice is most commonly paired off with wind, fire, and toxic. For runes, you most likely want to go with a dash, so you have your mobility, or you might want to go with a Shadowstep to hide your charge time. With Alacrity, your boots aren't as important, so dropping off drop in the afforded areas isn't as bad. You really want to focus on getting an amulet because frost drains a lot of mana on shot. Conduit's first ability is Potential Energy. Each time you cast a bolt, your damage ranks up. Remember that you don't have to actually hit the target to have the rank up. Overload. On using your lightning sorcery, you get another rune charge. With Overload, you don't need to use your rune instantly. You can use your sorcery and store up your rune. So in a battle later on, you can use your sorcery mid-fight and have 3 runes and not 1. So look at me here now. 1, 2, I use my sorcery, 3. Power Surge. On your sorcery cast, you have infinite mana. This works with any spell, not only your lightning. With Power Surge, you can really use the technique of not having to hit all your shots just to get the ram up. You can even hide some of your shots and then put them on your target to surprise them with a higher burst. Secondary Strike, plus 4 lightning strikes. Very nice damage. If you land all of those, people melt. This goes for every class. Any Gauntlet really works. I'm just setting the most commonly used ones. I would suggest you use Fire as your offhand. Toxic is also very great, but it's much harder to execute. Because of the way Conduit interacts with runes, you can use any, but I would suggest Dash, Flight, Teleport, Shadowstep. Potential Energy to have your max damage needs windup, and that requires a lot of mana, so I would suggest you get an amulet. For talents, I would suggest Focus Mana, Runic, Harmony, Scavenging, Fervor, Fortitude, Recklessness, Recovery, Thirsty. It is really flexible. The most common build is Runic Fervor Recovery. Your first ability as Tempist is Wind Surge. It allows you to jump off walls and ground. This takes a lot less mana than levitating. It is also faster. The Wind Jump has multiple fun mechanics that make it a great mobility class, but it's way too hard for me to explain all of its mechanics in this one video. With Wind Jump, you can refresh each time you wind shear, you refresh your rune touching ground, so you can activate it without touching ground. So theoretically, you never need to touch the ground. Updraft. Once you enter tornado, you go up. You can bounce on tornadoes multiple times. The tornadoes pull people. If you're jumping, it pulls you more. Squall. Once you're 1 second in the air, you take reduced damage and deal more damage. Remember, you do not need to wind jump to activate Squall. Sudden Gust. Once you're in the air for 1 second, your sorcery cooldowns get reduced. Best offhand for Wind and Tempest is Toxic, Ice, Fire. I would suggest the Dash rune, and I would suggest for you to focus on getting boots, because they help you with wind jumping. Best talents for Tempest are Spellslinger for Runic, Focus Mana, Fervor, Recovery, Thirsty, Recklessness. I would suggest Spellslinger if you are advanced, Runic for most people, Fervor, and Thirsty. Please note, in this video I will say stuff like best and greatest or good. This is just my opinion and my suggestion, especially now in a closed beta state. A lot of stuff might change, and feel free to experiment. This is just the builds I've been working in beta for most players. If you are struggling to understand which build you should go, on most classes, Runic Fervor Recovery works great. Or you can go with Harmony, Fervor, Escapist, or Recklessness, if you're feeling like you're getting stunned or frozen or shocked a lot. A lot of things interact with the Lightning base spell. You can apply it, the stun ability, to multiple things. While under stun, you cannot shoot or use your rune. However, you can move and levitate. Over 90-degree slopes cut stone off. Rarities are common, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary. Do not levitate during combat. Try to use levitation only outside of combat as traversing the terrain type of thing. It eats up a lot of your mana bar, so it's really hard for you to use your levitation and your spells at the same time. Fight at your Gauntlet's efficient range. Don't try to go for long range fireballs all the time. Or don't try to go for long range wind shots all the time. Try to be always active and always mobile. Don't stand still and be unpredictable. Most runes that are movement have an omnidirectional thing to them. Do not start a fight until you have at least rare of everything, especially not a belt. Belt is super important in this game. Most of the time you want to get at least level 1. Most classes have a power surge where they get some sort of damage buff of level 3. Most of the time you want to use your class mobility to get into a fight and use your runes to get out. Don't be greedy, it pays off. Loot quick and loot fast. Keep 3 shield potions and 1 health potion, a big one, in your inventory. You can mark skill points on the map, and once they get taken, you will notice them disappearing. This is how you can track enemies by marking skill points on the map and checking periodically if they have been taken. First zone doesn't do that much damage, the second also, the third and fourth ones are the ones that hurt a lot. High ground, very good, keep high ground, don't fall off like a dum-dum, keep high ground. You want to stack any advantage you have, don't forget to use your natural terrain as cover. And try to avoid using your spells as cover as much as you can because you lose damage or potential to use those spells in other ways. Be patient with your shots. This is a projectile based game. You want to wait until an opponent just started using their momentum or at the apex of their momentum or at the end of their momentum. Standing still is death. If you're running out of mana, what you can do is you can use your rune as a reload animation cancel. If it's hard hitting the enemies, try focusing on hitting their feet. Since there's no headshot multiplier and most projectile arcs usually land either in or around their feet area, it's actually quite beneficial to shoot at their feet. If you find it difficult to hit your toxic, try aiming at the lower part of the body, or aiming at the middle and flicking down. If you have any more questions, you can check me out on Very Crisp on Twitch or on Twitter. There is also a very competitive Discord that screams daily. If you wish to join on the competitive side of Spellbreak, it's called Element Spellbreak. It's in the description below. This has been Very Crisp. I hope I was informative. I was trying to keep it brief, so I might have skimmed over some more important or some more in-depth details. Those you can find in the Discords or in more specific videos or guides. And I see you in the Halloween, my dudes. Ooh.